So let's listen to Jon and about his citizen, not consumer thinking. Thank you.
Great.
So, teşekkürler, thank you, and günaydın, good morning, and that, I'm afraid, is as far as my Turkish goes, so I will now be in English. What I wanted to do today, with the honor of being the opening content speaker of the morning, is actually to start right from the top, and to put this question of why are we here even higher, and to ask, what are museums really for? Why do museums matter right now in this contemporary moment in society, this moment of great flux and change? And I want to start actually by throwing that question back to you. So I know you've just met each other. What I want you to do is just the person next to you. I'm just going to give you 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes, and then I'm going to call you back up. Just have a little opening conversation. Why do museums matter right now? Let's ask that question of each other. So just turn in pairs and just take 2 minutes to have a little chat about that question. Go for it. Okay, I'm going to call you back in, so come back to me now, please. And what I want to do with that is really just start a conversation, start and seed a conversation. And I really hope at the end of my time with you this morning, you'll have got some energy around that conversation, because what I'm going to do is try and put some provocation into exactly that conversation. What are museums for in this contemporary moment, in this moment that we live in right now? And hopefully, maybe at the end, in the Q&A, we might pick up some of the conversations you've been having. Hopefully, though, this is a conversation that you'll take further over the next 2 or 3 days. The provocation that I want to offer into that comes from my work. I run an organization called the New Citizenship Project. And I think I'm here really because our organization is becoming more and more widely known for having an interesting take on what this contemporary moment we're living in is. And in particular, we're increasingly working with museums and cultural heritage organizations because we believe that your organizations have such an important role to play right now. But I think also we're learning and we're recognizing the more we work with museums that there's an anchor on what museums are doing and are capable of. And we think it's the definition of the museum, the definition of the concept of the museum. And the best proxy I can find, without wishing to be the English guy coming to an international conference and calling up the Oxford English Dictionary, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. The definition of the word museum in the Oxford English Dictionary: a building or place where works of art, scientific specimens, or objects of permanent value are kept and displayed. And I have checked. I've spoken to some of you know already, and checked that this is a definition of concept that is fairly wide across languages. So it's not just that I'm using an English word definition. I'm using a concept definition. And I think this is a definition that still has too much influence on what we do, and still has too much influence on the way we work, and one that in this contemporary moment we actually need to shake. We need to shake up and move on from. And the way I'm going to lay down that challenge is I want to do 3 things. Firstly, I want to start by offering you an idea, a story by which to understand this contemporary moment that I'm talking about. Then I'm going to offer you a case study of one organization that we've been working with in quite a lot of detail over the last few years. to show how we might start to explore and explore that redefinition. And then finally, I'm gonna sum up with what I think are kind of 5 start points, 5 steps, and you'll find there's a leaflet outside it with a few contact details if you want to follow up with me. But let's start with that story. And the story, very simply, is this: subject, consumer, citizen. And what this story is really it's a story of an evolution of the role of the individual in society, and the timescales and what exactly is going on changes from place to place across sectors. But broadly, we see this as a brushstroke story that can really help us understand where we are today. And broadly, it works like this: at the beginning of the 20th century, the dominant role of the individual in society is something like the subject. It's an idea that says, do as you're told. The right thing for the individual to do is to do as you're told, to accept your station in society, to keep your head down and do your duty. And if everyone does that, then the best society will result. In Western Europe and in the UK and the US, where I've done most of my work, that idea really fell apart in the course of the Second World War. And actually, through the second half of the 20th century, there's a different idea emerging of what the role of the individual in society is. And this is what we call the consumer. And this idea says, actually, the right thing to do is to get the best deal for yourself, measured primarily in material standards of living and in the short term as a narrowly defined individual. Look out for number one. Choose the best thing for you from the options that are available. And if everyone does that, then the best society will result. And what we think is going on right now, and the story we're offering and the way to understand this contemporary moment, is that actually where we are right now is that story is starting to crumble, just as the subject did before it. And actually what's happening is that there's a moment of change going on, and 2 futures are kind of emerging at once. One is a future of the consumer, a kind of intensified logic of that story. And the other is a future of the citizen, an idea of a different idea of the individual, something like the right thing to do isn't just to get the best deal for yourself, but is actually to participate in shaping the context of your life, to not just to make the choice between the things that are offered, but to shape the choices, and not just to judge what's best for you as an individual, but to play your part in judging what's best for the society as a whole. Now, let me colour in those last two, the consumer and the citizen, a little bit. And to do that, I'm going to use some of the sort of totemic moments and organisations of them. And the consumer, it's very easy. I go, and I love this, the year 1984 is deeply powerful. 1984 was the year that Apple launched the Macintosh, with the most famous ad in history, a takeoff. My background is in advertising, so I'm a student of these things. A takeoff of Orwell's 1984. Also that year, Virgin Atlantic launched. So 2 of the great iconic consumer brands launching. And both of them coming into markets which had previously been dominated by the kind of sole option. If you wanted a computer, you got an IBM. If you wanted a flight, you took the flag carrier. And disrupting those. But also that year, you had Body Shop, Band-Aid, the Los Angeles Olympics. And these colour in this picture. So the Body Shop floated on the London Stock Exchange that year, and bringing with it the story that we could buy stuff to solve environmental problems. Band-Aid was that year, bringing with it the story that we could buy stuff to solve global poverty. And the Los Angeles Olympics were the first Olympics to be funded by commercial sponsorship. And LA was the only city to apply to host those Olympics on the sole proviso that they could take commercial sponsorship. So the idea that you can buy stuff to fund global sport and culture. So it really was a kind of golden dream. And I think we can all see, and many of us talk a lot about the cracks that are appearing in consumerism as a social mode. But it's important to remember that from what came before it, this idea of the subject where you get what you're given, this was a deeply liberating shift. In fact, so liberating that going back a few more years, in 1960, Hotpoint released a washing machine called the Liberator in the UK. Moving on, so if that helps us understand what the idea of the consumer was, what can we call on to understand the idea of the citizen? Here are 6 of my favourites. I think there are many more, and I'll just talk about 3 of them. The first I want to talk about is Lumio, bottom middle. Lumio is an online group decision-making tool, and it was founded by a group of 6 students in Wellington, New Zealand, who met during the Occupy movement and were deeply frustrated by the decision-making processes in that movement. And so what they did, they're all PhD students of computer science and brain science and so on, they came together and designed a group decision-making tool. And this tool is now rolling around the world. It's used in tens of countries by hundreds and thousands, actually, of groups to make tens of thousands of decisions. It's the organizing engine behind the Podemos movement in Spain, but it's also used by towns and villages. It's been used by towns and villages of a more conservative persuasion in the UK to do their neighborhood plans. It's a really interesting idea of using the internet actually and bringing the concepts of user experience and design to bear on participation, not just on consumption. Then I want to talk about the top middle, the £10 note. I love this. This is my local Brixton currency in South London, the Brixton pound, with an image of David Bowie, one of Brixton's favourite sons, on the note. And what this speaks to really, so this is important not because of Brixton, but because there are over 4,000 local currencies that have emerged now around the world. That was at last count about 3 years ago, and they've been exploding. And what local currencies speak to is this idea that actually money doesn't just have to be a means of individual consumption. It can be a means of genuine cultural engagement. The way local currencies work is they discount and therefore incentivize trade between local partners and participation in the local community and the local economy. Really interesting reframing of the concept of money. And then the third one I want to talk about is the B Corporation movement. And I think our friends at BKG might well want to look into this and become a B Corporation. B corporations are businesses that exist for profit, but also for purpose, and actually hold that purpose, that social and environmental purpose, as high or higher than their profit motive. And this is a new form of legislation has been enacted in 28 states across America now to create this type of organization. And it's rolling out around the world. It's present on every continent, and is really a very powerful movement. And what it's saying is that even business, the sort of archetype of pursue narrowly defined measures of success, is expanding beyond that and holding purpose higher. So there's something very interesting and very powerful going on. But there is a difference between the shift from the subject to the consumer and the shift from the consumer to the citizen. We can look back at the shift from subject to consumer and we can understand it's happened. I think where we are right now is in the middle of this period of change, and we don't know which way it's going to go. And actually, there's two futures, as I say, emerging at once. One is this future bubbling up all around us, which has a kind of real positivity and generativity to it. But then also there's this future, and this is I took this photo at Davos at the World Economic Forum last year, and it's a poster that was on the side of the Indian delegation's building, and this is still the dream in most of the mainstream story that we're pursuing. But we know where this ends, and yet it's still the dream. So that, I think, this idea of being in this moment in time of flux and change, really expresses where I think we are in this room today. We're in this moment of change, and it's not clear which way it's going to go. But this is why it's so important to be here, because I think museums have a really important role to play. If we're to move into a society where actually constructing our identity doesn't just happen through generic brands we purchase, but happens through the cultures that we're part of, museums need to step up and be a part of that. And that's why we're so passionate about working with museums, that we need to reclaim that original language, the idea of the place of the muse, the idea of inspiration, of creation of culture, not just of storage of objects. And so let me talk, as I say, that's my where are we. Let me talk about one case study to give you an idea of what it might look like. And this case study is an organisation called the National Trust. For those of you who don't know it, the National Trust is an organisation in the UK. It's been around for over 100 years and was founded with the original mission to ensure the universal access to beauty for all, essentially. And it's in some ways it's one of the biggest museum organisations in the world. It owns over 350 individual stately homes and castles. And the quality of the collections in some of these places is astounding. A new general manager started at one of these places recently, and in exploring more thoroughly than any of his predecessors, found a Tintoretto on the back stairs. So that gives you an idea of the quality. It's also an organisation that owns over 700 miles of the UK's coastline and something like 1% of the landmass in countryside. But the National Trust was absolutely in this place. It's an organisation that has been doing very well, actually, on the mode of the consumer as an organisation. for the consumer. It reached its 4 millionth member sometime during our work with the National Trust, which is a huge number. But there's a big problem, and the problem is that the story the National Trust has been telling has been saying, your role, people, is to buy from us, is to pay into us, and we'll do the rest. And as a result, what's happened is that the specialness of the places that the National Trust is there to look after has been declining. And as the strategy director of the National Trust put it, he said, we're in danger of becoming an organisation that looks after 600,000 acres of oases in the desert. And really, that's what we've been telling people to do. As an organisation, the National Trust have been telling people just to come and visit and have your days out, and we'll do the rest. And so we wanted to explore what would it look like to think of people in their interactions with the National Trust, not just as consumers, but as citizens. And this I think, is a diagram. It's a very simple one, but it's one that I think we found very useful in all of our dealings with museums today. And what it's really saying is this: don't just be an organisation on this axis that looks after the objects or the places and allows people in. But also, don't just be an organisation that sells itself to people. Don't just be an organisation that thinks about what people think of it. Most importantly, actually, think about that third axis, the relationship between people and culture or places, depending on the organisation. And so for the National Trust, what we did was we defined a purpose for the organisation, a brand purpose, of growing the nation's love of special places. And let me give you a few examples of what that definition led to. The first is these guys. These guys are National Trust Rangers. And over the last few years, we've totally changed their role in the organisation. Where they were before, they were called wardens, and their role was effectively to protect places, outdoor places, from people. And they were at best the kind of countryside handymen. They had recessive clothing. They weren't there to play an active role. And I think many of us have those sorts of people in our organisations, whether it's security guards or whatever. But what we did was we realised that these are the people on the front line. These are the people out there who can really actively facilitate this relationship between people and place. So we made them more active, we made them more visible, and we made them the voice of the organisation. They now are the authors of guides to National Trust places. The second thing we did was we started to think about the National Trust's role in the outdoors. And one of the brief that was in the marketing communications department at the time was make the National Trust famous for the outdoors. And the working title of a campaign, which was very much on the people to National Trust axis, was Get Outdoors with the National Trust. And instead what we did was we stepped back and we said, well, what's the relationship between people and place in the outdoors that needs our help? What can the National Trust do? What can it serve? And we decided that the relationship between children and nature could really do with a boost with the support of the National Trust. And that made us realise that we weren't the only people with that mission. And so what we did was we collaborated with all sorts of organisations. There are now 1,500 plus organisations that are members of something called the Wild Network in the UK. And we made a film. We made a feature-length documentary that had a nationwide cinema release and earned a 4-star review in several newspapers, Project Wild Thing, including a girl licking a frog. Why not? And we also delivered a marketing campaign for the Trust, because you have to do these things. But that campaign wasn't called Get Outdoors with the National Trust. It was called 50 Things to Do Before You're 11 3/4. And that campaign has gone wild and done more for the fame of the National Trust as an outdoors organisation and its viability as a business than any previous marketing campaign, despite the fact, or actually because of the fact, that it came from asking a question about how can we fulfil our purpose, not asking a question about how can we tell people something about us. The final example is from membership of the National Trust, which was very much framed in this way, as a product you buy from us. It was framed as become a member, own membership, own a free pass card to National Trust places. And what we've been doing over the last few years, and this work still continues, is exploring, well, what would it look like actually to think of membership in the National Trust as participation in the cause of the National Trust? And yes, visiting will still be part of it, and buying from the shops will still be part of it, but those will mean something rather than just be means to financial ends. Those will have meaning in themselves. So that's my case study, and I want to draw out from it these 5 steps, those 5 sort of start points that I think you could think about in what you're doing to start behaving towards people as citizens rather than just as consumers or as subjects. The first is define. Define a purpose. Define a purpose that's higher than yourselves and bigger than yourselves. And that's what the National Trust did with Growing the Nation's Love of Special Places. Secondly, but it might come first, actually, because this is the nature of these things. We try something and then we learn from it. Experiment. The Rangers example in the Trust started in one place, one tiny place in the southwest of England, but then grew out from there. Thirdly, collaborate. When you look to work alongside people as citizens, when you look to serve a purpose, you see that others in this room, beyond this room, in your cities, in your places, are actually not your competition at all. It's not between the Baltimore Museum of Art and the Walters. It's how can those organizations come together and serve the championing the power of art for the people of that city. Fourthly, evaluate. And this is really important because the things we measure dictate what we can do and what we can think. And for the National Trust, membership acquisition was a key part of, was one of the most important numbers to measure. But as a result, they were recruiting vast numbers of members every year, but also losing them. So there was a business model problem there. And when you switch the measures, when you switch to things like lifetime value or measuring your effect against some higher cause that you're trying to involve, then you open up your opportunities to do things differently. And finally, involve. And this is somewhere the National Trust haven't gone to yet. This is the ultimate of citizen innovation. This is about how do you work with people? How do you bring people in and help them be part of what you're trying to do? My favorite example in this is an organization called 64 Million Artists in the UK, which is basically a grassroots cultural campaign that creates a community of people setting each other challenges to uncover their own creative potential. It's called 64 Million Artists because the underlying belief is that everyone in the country has artistic creative agency. Not that they're an artist with a capital A, but that they are an artist with a small a. Of course, we don't have and I don't want to have, and I don't proclaim to have any kind of copyright over this way of thinking. In fact, I see it bubbling up everywhere already, just as the examples I called out of the citizen era are bubbling up in other industries and other sectors. I love the example of the Rijksmuseum and the Rijksstudio, the idea of opening up the content of the organization and helping people, actively facilitating people to create things with it. I love the work of Nina Simon and the Participatory Museum. And if you haven't seen her work or read her examples, then you really should. But I do think we're adding something to that. And what we're adding is that this isn't just nice, this isn't just good practice. This is a fundamental contribution that the museum sector can make to society. And if we can do more of this, and if we can really go for this, then I think we can get to a place where the definition of a museum can explicitly move on from a building or place where works of art and objects of permanent value are kept and displayed, to something a bit more like this. A catalytic space for the inspiration, curation, and creation of culture by, with, and for the public. And I think if we could have a conversation about that this week, if you can talk to each other about how can we fulfill the role that our societies need of us, rather than just how can we sell to a few more consumers, if you can orient yourselves like that, I think you'll get way more out of this week, and I really hope I can help in some way. Thank you.